Hello, welcome back to Colonel O'Truth's Miniature Issues. I've had a short break, but now I'm back again and we're continuing with the build of High Crag, in particular the Sluice Gatekeeper's house. The Sluice Gatekeeper's house starts, as most of my buildings, as a piece of black cardboard. I've marked out the various pieces quite precisely, and I'm just cutting them here. Why black cardboard? Well, I make the windows transparent, and I don't want bright card, white or grey, showing through from behind. It breaks the illusion. So having a nice dark interior helps with that. I'm checking that the pieces will fit here and how much of the cliff I'll have to carve away. This house is going to sit astride the waterfall, controlling the sluice gate. Having marked out where the building is going to sit, I'm creating a flat area by cutting into the cliff face. It'll be easier to work this way than to try and fit the model into lots of odd shapes. I'll cut out a piece of the cliff, fit the house in, and then sculpt the cliff back in around it. It also helps me to visualize how things are going to look. Once I'm happy with where everything's sitting, I'm adding details. You can see where the cliff is going to overlap this piece. And I've created an arch which will sit astride the waterfall. I often work this way, piecing together my buildings a little at a time and visualizing them as I go. I've decided that this piece should become two buildings at right angles to each other, jutting out from the cliff face over the great big drop below. This is fantasy after all. And so it takes shape, a little bit at a time. This is one of those cases where having decent glue definitely pays for itself. I'm putting each piece in place, and they're more or less staying where I want them straight away. It's starting to look like quite a complex structure, but it's just a series of fairly simple shapes. checking it in place against the cliff face. If you're new to this channel and to Undercrag City, please do go back and have a look at the 30-something videos I've made so far, and please remember to subscribe. In this series I've covered waterfalls, water wheels, bridges, roof tiles, timber frame buildings, city walls, lighting, and everything has been made using simple materials and simple techniques. I hope you find something useful. Back to the house. I've created what appears to be an inverted roof underneath it. Where this building juts out from the cliff face, I didn't want a flat floor, I wanted something a bit more elegant. And the idea that the building looks a little bit upside down really appeals to me. There's a large central beam constructed from basswood, and then more timber framing, constructed from balsa. And then we're into timber framing for the rest of the building, which I've covered many times before. I'll put a link below to a video where I show this in more detail. Now it's time for some roof tiles. As usual, these are just cut from a cat food packet. This is an odd-shaped section of roof. It's intended to look like it's cutting into the mountainside. Matchsticks for strong timbers, and you can see at this stage I've been working on the cliff face as well. You can see more of that in my previous videos. Now for the undercoat. This is light grey house paint from a test pot. It's cheap and effective. I'm daubing this on thickly and then using the brush to spread it around and thin it out. Once the grey is dry, the whole model gets washed with brown ink. And it looks pretty shabby at this stage, but that's okay. When the brown is dry, the whole model is dry brushed with a pale yellow, paying particular attention to the panels in between the timbers. This is a very fast and loose technique. After the yellow, white. I'm working even faster than with the yellow. There we go. There are lots of different tones here, lots of depth. The panels aren't pure white, they're not pure yellow, they tend towards brown in the corners. The timbers look dirty. They're not finished, of course, but this is a good undercoat. You can see the door in the cliff face is taking shape there as well. Now here's a more careful part. Brown ink on every timber. You can see the different tones are coming through the brown, giving it a worn and stained look. You can also see I'm not just painting the faces of the timbers, I've got down the sides, tops and bottoms of every one. This is quite time consuming, but it gives it the depth that I want. The roof tiles are washed with rust ink. I love the bright contrast between the tiles and the wooden framing. Now for the window glass. This is a piece of clear acetate, but you could use any clear plastic. I'm daubing it heavily with Mod Podge. I'm not going for a smooth finish. And while that's drying, I'm creating a back piece for the sluice gate. The idea here is that inside the building there's a mechanism that drops or raises the gate, controlling the flow of the water. Marking the individual planks into the gate. And cutting notches just at the ends so I can remove pieces of the planks and make the gate look a little bit imperfect. Everything in Undercrag City is old and worn out. I know how it feels. Creating an outer frame using black card. And some brackets on the corners. Building things up like this in layers, one after the other, just gives such a great feeling of depth, and it's not hard to do. Adding the hardware to the doors. Small pieces of thin card, hinges and door plates, not too worried about the PVA, it shrinks and dries clear. And now I'm thinking about a balcony. These are just ordinary matchsticks. I picked up a bag of about 300 for about $3. They're the perfect scale for thick timbers. A few balsa strips on the top. And some wooden posts. I want to get these looking nice and straight, so there's a bit of fiddling about using my trusty pointy stick. A good thick handrail. Health and safety is definitely a factor here. This is a long way up. The hardware's been painted in with silver and rust ink. I'm not worrying about an undercoat on the matchsticks and bridge. This is just brown ink. It flows quite nicely, gets into all of the gaps. Once that's dry, same highlighting as before, pale yellow, then white. And a lighting test. I talked in more detail about lighting in a previous episode. Again, I'll put a link below. Plenty of glue once I'm ready to install this. If you're interested in the door and the little shelf there and the waterfall, those are all covered in previous episodes. And in we go. I'm using Das clay to fill in all of the gaps and start to sculpt the building into the cliff face. Working the clay in using PVA and a brush. I've talked about this before. PVA really helps to strengthen the clay, keeps it from cracking, and makes it set faster. Just sculpting in more and more. I want this to look properly organic. Maybe the building exploited a natural shape in the rock, or maybe the rock was hacked away to fit the building. Over the years, earth and stones have built up. It's hard to tell where one stops and the other begins. And I'm enclosing the top of the building here. Just a piece of foam, lots more clay. Just putting the clay on in blobs and sculpting it afterwards. Another lighting test, make sure nothing came loose during installation. And it's time to work on the rocks. These are painted dark grey, highlighted light grey, highlighted white. When all that's done, I'm going to start adding a little bit of texture. Just a bit of fine sand on PVA. To do this, I've laid the entire city on its side. Fortunately, Undercrag doesn't weigh very much at all. I can lift it with one hand. Now a very thin black wash over everything. And while that's wet, green ink. And while that's wet, yellow ink. The yellow and green combine, not to create one even colour, but to create lots of different textures all over the rock face. Adding some soft clay and PVA, and this will create a base for my statue. This miniature's just been painted with the same greys as the cliff, and some details picked out in gold. This is the second statue to go into Undercrag City. The first one is down outside Highchapel. I'm adding the grey base coat without even letting all of this dry. It all just blends it together. When it is dry, more dry brushing. I've highlighted some of the mossy patches with a bit of dry brushing of light grey. Now I'm adding a bit more yellow. They weren't quite bright enough for me. A few red flowers and a bit of static grass, and this section of Undercrag City is done. So that's it, the Sluice Gatekeeper's house, sitting high above the rest of Undercrag City. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you'll continue to watch Undercrag growing. Please keep up your comments and questions. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.